the end of Ragtime. So I hope you've recovered from my total mangling of those lyrics and watched the little play clip that I put in as a separate YouTube video, because Make Them Hear You is a beautiful song and actually has become something of an anthem. It's been sung at concerts, at rallies, at for civil rights, at various places like that. So anyway, but I gave you one where they're singing it during a production of the play, so you could kind of see the context. So what about Coalhouse? Obviously, he doesn't survive, so it's not a happy ending. He and Sarah are crushed because the problem of racism and the extent of racism is so huge that they're just crushed under its heel. But he does get a sort of redemption. First of all, the only one who's surprised that Coalhouse is shot when he steps out the door is father, who is self-deluded, as we've heard from younger brother. Coalhouse, his men, the police, everybody else, the way they talk about the plan, they realize that even though the white people promised Coalhouse a fair trial where his point of view will get heard, that they're going to shoot him as soon as they step out the door. And nobody understands this better than Coalhouse. And so his concern becomes getting his followers to safety. And so father is at this point acting as go-between between the police and Coalhouse, okay? Actually, let's back up a little bit more. The first go-between between the police and Coalhouse is Booker T. Washington. So Booker T. Washington is a famous historical figure, and I will add him to our wiki. He is, these days, kind of, not just these days, as soon as the 1950s, a controversial figure in African American history. Because on the one hand, he founded the first African American universities. His attitude was, that's fine, if the whites don't want to let us into their colleges because we're black, we'll build our own colleges and we'll become black doctors, black lawyers, black writers, everything that the white people are, and we'll do it for ourselves, and also we'll do it with the money of rich white men who owe us anyway. And so, yeah, he founded those colleges mostly with the money of rich white men, and they helped thousands and thousands of black people escape from poverty and kind of helped begin a black middle class. But and so for that he's very lauded. But he spoke very strongly against agitating for equal rights. And so for that he's very criticized, because obviously equal rights didn't come until black people and white allies started to fight for them in the 1960s or so. Booker T. Washington's philosophy was that if black people are just good enough, like if they act like totally non-threatening, non-dangerous, well-off, educated people, white people will just spontaneously see that they deserve equality. And obviously this is not the way it works with any group. People in power tend to not give up any power until, they're forced to, until people have fought for those rights and changed the hearts and minds of the country. And so Booker T. Washington is a very controversial figure. So he comes in, he's the most famous black man of his day, and he tells Coalhouse that, you've done horrible damage to the thousands of black people who are struggling to be accepted in white society, by reinforcing the stereotypes that black men are violent and crazy and stuff like this. But, he doesn't understand Coalhouse in his fight for justice. But on the other hand, he does say something that Coalhouse listens to, which is, he says, think of these young men who are following you, and younger brother and, the other people following Coalhouse are supposed to be a good, 10, they're supposed to be kind of college age, whereas Coalhouse is supposed to be a real grown-up of 35 or something like that. He says, think about what you're teaching them. Think about their lives that they're going to sacrifice for you. And think about your son and how he's going to grow up hearing about you and what he's going to think about what you chose to do. And so this has an effect on Coalhouse, and so Coalhouse agrees to modify his demands. He no longer demands the death of Willie Conklin, just his arrest. He wants the car back, but he wants it to be a getaway vehicle for his followers, including younger brother, so that they can escape. And he wants the police to let them escape and not follow them. And he says he's going to have his hand on the plunger of, the dynamite. He'll blow up the library unless he gets a phone call from his followers saying that they're safe. Okay. So this is the deal that he makes. And so he makes this deal to make sure the police don't follow them. He makes the deal for his followers to escape with a white hostage. And so the police think Father's the hostage, but actually what happens is younger brother leaves with the other followers of Coalhouse as the white hostage. So that he gets away too, and Father's just left in the library to wait till everything calms down, and then of course he comes out, and he's going to be fine, So in some ways Coalhouse is redeemed by his concern for his followers and his son is the last thing he wants to talk about with Father before he goes out to be shot. Is he walking? What does he like to eat? So his son is the last thing on his mind, and you get the idea that he's the only thing that could convince him to stop fighting is, will this do damage to his son when his son is an adult and trying to be accepted in society? Younger brother's fate is in some ways the most difficult to come to terms with. Are we supposed to admire him? Pity him? Certainly he remains true to the core of his character, which is that he goes to extremes. He does everything to extremes. He has a crush on someone, he becomes their stalker. Okay? He decides he's going to become he hears Emma Goldman speak, and he suddenly decides he's a revolutionary. And he's going to go to extremes, and he's going to be the best revolutionary possible. So he finds something to believe in. And eventually that ends up being, first it's Coalhouse. Younger brother and Sarah were actually friends. Mother had a more mother-daughter relationship with Sarah. There's a little note, it's in the text, that younger brother and Sarah are the same age. They're both college age. And so they become friends when Sarah's living in the house. So he really does mourn Sarah. And so first he follows Coalhouse, and then he goes to join the Mexican Revolution, which is what he heard Emma speak about. And I am not an expert on the Mexican Revolution, but I do know that it was a peasant uprising, and so it was a fight for economic equality. It was the poor versus the rich. And this is not a coincidence that Dr. O chose this to be younger brother's fight, because again, we're getting to the core of the book isn't necessarily that... The core of the book isn't necessarily that it's the government that's bad, that democracy is bad, but more that the rich have too much power to pervert democracy, both in the past and continuing today. And so he goes off to fight a fight that is specifically about poverty versus money, and he dies, okay? And so is this a noble death? Is it a happy ending of a sort? Or is it just go to prove that he's a fanatic? I mean, nobody calls George Washington a fanatic for fighting the English over economic equality. Remember, it was taxes and tea thrown in the Boston Harbor. It was economic equality that spurred us on to the American Revolution. And the American Revolution was fought with guns and people died. It was a violent conflict. Nobody calls them fanatics. So is he like them? Certainly we're before the era where nonviolent protest had been proved as an effective tool of changing hearts and minds. And therefore society. nonviolent protest, although the suffragettes, the people agitating for women's rights, were having nonviolent protests, but they weren't as big. Like the first time it really proved to the world that nonviolent protests could do a ton was with Gandhi in India, and then later Martin Luther King in the United States. So we're before that. So do we blame him for fighting for justice with violence? I don't know. The best way I have of understanding him is to pose the question, how do you be a good white man in this book? So to answer that, we have Tata and younger brother to look to. And Tata's also trying to change the country, right? Through his art that portrays races of classes and children of all races and classes and backgrounds, treating each other equally. If you don't think this is radical for the time, you have to remember that in the 1950s, white people from the South wouldn't swim in a swimming pool that black children had swum in. If you've seen the movie The Help, you know that there was this whole thing about, using toilets. Can you let your maid use your toilet, or does that contaminate it? I mean, racism was so extreme that having a movie where black and white children were friends was radical. So Tata's also going after hearts and minds and trying to change society. So when we look at the two of them, which one gets the happier ending? Well, obviously it's Tata who's picking the non-violent way. And the non-violent way of being a good white person in this book is just to express, his view of how the world should be. And so in the end, that's kind of what the book is asking of us, is just for us to speak up in the face of injustice and spread our version of how we think America should be against versions that are filled with hate. So why did I make you read this book? Well, one reason I chose it is that I feel like we're all in it. Whatever background we come from, whatever race or religion we are, whether our family's immigrant experience is all the way back to Columbus or several generations back, or something you experienced yourself, I feel like it's a history that includes all of us. I hope you feel that way too. And of course, I wanted a book that was at your challenge level for reading, because if you could read the book and understand it fully without me, then it's not the book I should choose, because you could read that book on your own, right? And the point of an English class is for you to read something that you can understand with my help. That's your challenge level, rather than your independent level. And of course, the other thing is I wanted there to be a book with lots and lots for us to talk about, so we wouldn't run out of things for class discussions. But also, I don't want you to grow up to be like Father with no sense of history. Let's just take one example. Police brutality has been in the news a lot in the last few years, and people are reacting with shock and outrage as if this is a new problem. Of course, it's not a new problem. It's been going on since the time of slavery, through the era of ragtime to today. It's just that white people have only recently been putting it in the newspapers and thinking about it. And of course, you should feel shocked and outraged when innocent people are killed. But understanding that it's not a new problem, but rather the way it's always been, is very important when it comes to the time to devise solutions for the problem. So the media up till now has been very focused on, is this specific police officer guilty or innocent? And not even just the news media, but a lot of the entertainment. It's weird to say entertainment about police brutality, but the literature, let's put it that way, about police brutality that's become popular. Like, I love The Hate U Give. That's a great book. I think everybody should read it. But it also focuses on the injustice of the white police officer not being held to account. And that's, of course, a very, very, very important issue. But when you think about solutions, and you think about this as something that's always been this way, even though we weren't paying attention. 100, innocent Black people per year have been dying from police brutality across the country forever. Then obviously the conviction of a specific police officer is not going to be the entire solution. Of course, holding police officers accountable is part of the solution, but part of the solution has to be widespread retraining and kind of a change in police culture. I'm not doing that. I didn't pick that to pick on the police, but just to show you how knowing the history of these issues is part of looking at them as a fully informed, educated citizen of our country. Also, this book has to do with the media, and the media is so much more intrusive to our lives now that we have social media too. It's become even more a part of our lives. And so I like that this book deals with issues of the media. As Ragtime points out, from beginning to end, media is a business. It's about money. What sells? Sex, violence, hundreds of children filling the train station, like when the kids were sent away from the Bread and Roses strike. So sometimes the media helps causes, and sometimes it hurts them. Think of Evelyn and how the media contributes to this objectification of her, where she thinks that all she is beautiful and all she has to offer is sex. The media in this book, and I think in the world, it's not good or evil. It's a tool people sometimes use well or use poorly. It's designed to attract your attention and appeal to your emotions. It's a business. That's what the book keeps coming back to. And we should never forget that and think that the news media is showing us the world as it is. Because actually my CT watched an Idea Channel video about this, because the news media is always showing us the world through the lens of the corporation that owns it and the companies who are paying to have ads in it. And it can't piss any of those people off. The rich have power over what we see in the media. So another point is that the line is kind of blurred between news and entertainment, both in this book and in the real world, and not just on late night talk shows where they make fun of the news for entertainment. The way that some crimes, like Evelyn, the crime of Henry K. Thaw, that Evelyn Nesbitt's involved in, become a kind of entertainment in the news. People follow the trial like it's a murder mystery, even though it's a real murder, but they follow it like it's, like they're reading serials of, an Agatha